After changing clothes, Lynn Taylor stepped out of the fitting room and instinctively glanced toward the room on the left, but the door had long been closed. "It suits your temperament very well," the saleswoman complimented, eyes professional and observant. With merely a glance at Lynn's slender frame, she knew exactly what style would match. The pale blue dress hugged Lynn's thin figure, highlighting her delicate fair skin. The soft ribbon around her waist only emphasized how fragile she looked, but her face was so beautiful it was difficult to look away. Richard Taylor found it suitable and immediately paid. When he saw the price, nearly 90 million VN, his expression twitched. But remembering they were about to meet the Thompson family, he clenched his teeth and paid anyway. His voice was ice cold. "Let's go." When he saw the price, nearly 90 million VN, his expression twitched. But remembering they were about to meet the Thompson family, he clenched his teeth and paid anyway. His voice was ice cold. "Let's go." Lynn understood his indifference, but every time she heard that tone, her heart still tightened painfully. She lowered her head and silently followed him to the car. Not long afterward, the vehicle stopped before the gate of a grand villa. The driver opened the door. Richard exited first. Lynn followed behind. Standing in front of the luxurious home, she stared blankly for a moment. While she and her mother had struggled overseas, suffering because of her brother's illness, the man who called himself her father lived lavishly here with his mistress and daughter. Her hands trembled as she clenched them tightly. "What are you standing there for?" Richard snapped, when he noticed she wasn't following. Lynn flinched and hurried after him. When the maid informed them that the Thompson family hadn't arrived yet, Richard told Lynn to wait in the living room. Near the tall glass window stood a Zeidel piano, German-made, extremely expensive. When Lynn was 5, her mother bought her an identical one. She had loved music since she was a child. She began learning at 4.5, but after being forced abroad, she no longer had the chance to touch a piano again. Now, looking at the instrument before her, emotions flooded back. Her fingers trembled as she touched a key. Ting! The clear, crisp note rang out. Though she hadn't practiced in years and her fingers were stiff, the sound still carried a familiar beauty. "Who told you could touch my things?" A sharp, angry voice burst behind her. Her things. In turned and saw Hannah Lin, 17 this year, 1 year younger than Lynn. She had inherited the beauty of her mother, Angela Shen, but her expression was twisted with disdain. "Yours?" Lynn repeated. They had destroyed her mother's marriage, spent her mother's money, and now even the piano that once belonged to her was claimed by this girl. Lynn curled her fingers tightly, reminding herself, "Do not react, not yet." She was no longer the helpless child who cried and begged 8 years ago. She had grown up. She had to endure for now. "You're Lynn Taylor." Hannah finally seemed to realize who she was. Today was the day the Thompson family came to formally meet Lynn. Their return was because of this. Hannah remembered vividly the pitiful sight of Lynn years ago, kneeling, clinging to Richard's leg, crying and begging not to be taken away. "Dad brought you back. You must be thrilled," Hannah mocked. She folded her arms. "Don't get ahead of yourself. He only brought you back to marry you off to the Thompsons. I heard that man is—" She covered her mouth in fake pity, while laughter flickered in her eyes. The thought of Lynn being forced to marry a man who couldn't walk, couldn't perform, made Hannah feel sheer delight. A lifetime ruin, how satisfying. Lynn simply frowned. Just then, the maid entered. "The Thompson family has arrived." Richard personally hurried out to greet them. Lynn turned, and immediately saw a man being pushed in by a wheelchair. Sharp features, commanding presence. Even sitting, he exuded a cold authority that no one could dismiss. That face, it was nothing like the man she saw embracing a woman in the fitting room earlier. How could this man in a wheelchair be Ethan Thompson? She clearly saw that man standing, walking, holding Bella Quinn without any sign of injury. What was going on? Before she could process, Richard called. That face, it was nothing like the man she saw embracing a woman in the fitting room earlier. How could this man in a wheelchair be Ethan Thompson? She clearly saw that man standing, walking, holding Bella Quinn without any sign of injury. What was going on? Before she could process, Richard called. Ethan studied Lynn. She was young, far too thin, pale, clearly malnourished. His brows furrowed. This marriage had been arranged by his mother. As her son, he could not refuse, so before returning, he intentionally spread news that his legs were ruined by the snakebite, that the venom left him unable to fulfill the duties of a husband, hoping the Taylor family would back out, yet they hadn't. His expression darkened. Thinking he was displeased, Richard quickly explained. She's still young, only 18. When she grows a bit older, she'd definitely become more beautiful. Ethan nearly scoffed. He knew beauty when he saw Etand. The girl before him was clearly not what Richard claimed. Still, the Taylor family dared bring her here and push this marriage on him. He laughed coldly, voice low. My legs were injured overseas. I may never walk again, nor fulfill a husband's responsibilities. I don't mind, Lynn answered instantly. Richard had made it clear if she married into the Thompson family, he would return her mother's dowry. Even if she divorced the next day, she still had to marry first, and she had already guessed Ethan could walk. He only sat in the wheelchair today to force her family to back out, likely for the sake of Bella Quinn. But instead, Richard abandoned his own daughter to force the marriage through. Ethan narrowed his eyes at Lynn. That look sent chills down her spine. She knew he didn't want this marriage, but she had no choice. If she refused, how would she return home? How would she reclaim what belonged to her mother? Lynn forced a small smile, tinged with bitterness. We were betrothed since childhood. No matter what you've become, I still must marry you. Ethan's gaze deepened. This girl knew how to speak, he had to admit. Richard, oblivious to the tension, quickly asked, So the wedding date? Ethan replied calmly. Of course, it will proceed as agreed. A promise between two families cannot be broken. Lynn lowered her eyes, hiding her thoughts. Neither of them wanted this marriage. They were just fulfilling an arrangement. Excellent. Richard almost couldn't hide his excitement. Using this unremarkable daughter to tie their family to the Thompson family, what a perfect deal. As he bowed again, fawning, I've prepared dinner, please stay, Mr. Thompson. Ethan frowned slightly. This kind of flattery irritated him. No need. I still have something to attend to. Quentin King began pushing his wheelchair toward the exit. As they passed Lynn, Ethan raised his hand slightly, signaling Quentin to stop. He looked up at her and asked, Miss Taylor, are you free?